Jonathan adjusted the collar of his jacket as he stepped out of his car, the cool air biting at his skin. A sharp ring from his phone broke the silence, sending a jolt through him.
Yeah.
He answered, his voice low.
John, we've got a scene down at East 5th and Main.
Came the voice of Detective Ramirez.
We need you here. Now. On my way.
His heart raced, not from fear, but from the thrill of the moment. Jonathan had been a crime scene photographer for the LAPD for 5 years, capturing the raw edges of life and death through his lens. The scene was chaotic. Officers bustled about, their voices a jumble of orders and observations. Jonathan slipped under the tape, feeling the weight of the atmosphere press against him. "Over here," a uniformed officer called. Gesturing toward the center of the commotion, Jonathan knelt, his camera poised as he began to capture the scene. A body sprawled on the ground, a pool of crimson soaking into the asphalt. The city hummed around him. He focused on the details, the torn fabric of the victim's jacket, the glint of a broken watch. "What a waste," he murmured, shaking his head. As he worked, a shiver crawled up his spine. He felt eyes on him, but when he glanced around, only the busy officers met his gaze. He dismissed it as nerves and continued snapping photos. Hours later, he returned home, the weight of the day still clinging to him. He set his camera on the table and sighed, the chill of the crime scene still in his bones. After a quick dinner, he tried to unwind, but sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned. The image of the body burned into his mind. Just as he began to drift off, a soft creak echoed through his apartment. Jonathan jolted awake, his heart thudding. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. In the corner of his dimly lit living room, he saw a figure sitting in his chair.
"You shouldn't have seen me,"
it whispered, voice like rustling leaves. Jonathan squinted, panic gripping him. "Who are you?"
"I'm Tony, I was killed. You captured it."
The figure's form flickered, a haze of gray and shadow. "What? No, this can't be happening." Tony leaned forward, his face twisted in sorrow.
"You have to help me. My brother, he's the one who did this."
Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. "What do you want me to do?"
"Find him. Show them the truth."
Jonathan rubbed his eyes, still unsure if he was dreaming. "Okay, I'll try. But I can't."
"Do it."
The figure faded, leaving Jonathan gasping in the silence. He blinked hard, heart racing. Morning light filtered through the curtains, but the heaviness in his chest remained. He hurriedly dressed and returned to the police station, heart pounding in his ears. "Detective Ramirez, I need to talk," he said, urgency spilling from his lips. Ramirez looked up, brow furrowed. "What's going on, John?" "I think I have something. The victim, Tony, he was killed by a gang member. I saw a ghost last night. He told me to find his brother." Ramirez chuckled, shaking his head. "Ghosts? You're pulling my leg." "No, I'm serious," Jonathan insisted, leaning closer. "I saw him. I think he's trying to tell us who did it." "All right, let's say I entertain your theory. What do you have? Evidence?" Jonathan hesitated, uncertain how to explain. "Just a feeling. I know it sounds crazy, but I think we need to look into his gang affiliations." Ramirez sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine, I'll get a search warrant. But if this goes nowhere..." "It won't," Jonathan replied, determination lining his voice. Hours later, the team moved in on a rundown apartment building in South Central. Jonathan stood back, tension coiling in his stomach as the SWAT team prepared to breach the door. "Go!" A shout echoed through the air, followed by a flurry of movement. The door burst open with a loud crash, sending splinters flying. "Freeze!" Gunshots rang out, sharp and menacing. Jonathan ducked behind a police car, heart racing. He could see the flash of gunfire through the openings. "Get down!" someone shouted. He clutched his camera, the instinct to document overwhelming despite the chaos. In the haze of gunfire, a figure stumbled out. Clutching his side, a young man with wild eyes. He fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Did we get him? Jonathan gasped, adrenaline coursing through him. "Target down!" a voice called back, but the sound of sirens grew louder, drowning everything else out. Jonathan's head spun as he processed what happened. He had been part of something bigger, something horrifying. That night he tried to sleep but was haunted by the images. The ghost of Tony. The chaos of the shootout. "Please, just let me rest," he whispered. But slumber did not come. A soft rustle pulled him awake again.
John.
A familiar voice called. He sat up, heart racing. There, at the foot of his bed, was the gang member from earlier, the one who had been shot. "Why are you here?" Jonathan croaked, fear thick in his throat.
Your friend is gone, but I still have a score to settle.
The ghost hissed, his eyes dark pools of malice. "No, I didn't do anything," Jonathan pleaded. "I just took pictures. I didn't mean for any of this to happen.
Your camera captured my death. You think that makes you innocent?
I just wanted to help." The ghost lunged forward, his form flickering with rage.
You're part of this now. You will pay.
Jonathan scrambled back, heart hammering. "Leave me alone," he shouted, but the specter only laughed, a sound that echoed in the dark. Days passed, each night bringing new horrors. Jonathan missed work, the world outside fading into a blur of shadows and whispers. The ghost tormented him, refusing to let him rest. Then, one afternoon, Detective Ramirez knocked on his door. "John, you in there?" Jonathan couldn't answer. He lay still, feeling the weight of his own dread. "Open up, we need to talk." With a heavy heart, he dragged himself to the door, opening it just enough to see Ramirez's worried expression. "Are you okay?" I've been seeing things." "Things?" Ramirez pressed, stepping inside. Jonathan gestured weakly, the room a mess of unwashed dishes and discarded clothes. "Ghosts from the crime scenes." Ramirez frowned, concern etching deeper lines in his face. "You need to get help. This isn't like you. The case is closed, and the gang member is gone. You're safe." "Am I?" Jonathan whispered, glancing towards the shadows. "Are any of us really safe?" Ramirez hesitated, then reached out, placing a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. "Let's talk about this. You can't keep it all inside." But before Jonathan could speak, a scream erupted from his throat, a sound of pure terror.
Get out! Get out!
Ramirez stepped back, eyes wide as Jonathan collapsed to the floor, eyes wide and wild. "John!" But it was too late. The ghost had returned, hovering over him like a dark cloud, and the last thing Jonathan saw was the twisted grin of a vengeful spirit. Days later, Jonathan's body was discovered, lifeless in his own bed, a look of horror etched on his face. Detective Ramirez stood at the threshold, a heavy weight of grief settling in his chest.
Damn it, John.
He murmured, shaking his head.
What happened to you?
The case remained unsolved, a ghost story lingering in the halls of the police department, a reminder of the thin line between life and death, and the haunting echoes of the past that can never be erased.